Hello, data enthusiasts. Today's Data for Good podcast is with Vineela Alamalakala. Vineela is data engineering manager at Berlin's very own ImmoScout24. And today's conversation was a really succinct, concise, and particularly interesting one if you're into data. So Vineela gave us an overview as to how she has helped to create ImmoScout24's data strategy. She helped us define what a good strategy looks like, to understand the potential pitfalls that can come up in you creating a data strategy, all the people that could be involved in data strategy building, discovering any shortcuts or templates that you might use. And she also provided us with her 4 pillars for creating effective data strategy. It's a good one, so enjoy the podcast. Well, I want to start with a quick question. And that is, where did data teams or data leaders go wrong with defining and then forming their data strategy?
Oh, that's an interesting one to start with. Um, I think a data strategy can go wrong when it is not aligned with the company overall strategy. Yeah, that's the first thing. And the second thing I can think of is um, when the data strategy is not broad enough, such that it is iterative for future purposes. Yeah, when we have very narrow scope. And the third
Mm,
is when we don't have clear objectives from the strategy. Yeah, that's also not a success criteria.
okay, fantastic. So when
Mhm.
data strategy is not aligned with the overall business strategy and with the scope, and when the scope is too narrow and it's not made with the future in mind.
Yeah.
Ah, interesting. Okay, so for nice and high level to begin with, and then we'll expand as we go. Before we go deep into the topic, could you explain data strategy at a really high level, perhaps to some of our junior data people or new people entering the world, or even on the business side, people like myself?
Sure. So data strategy is in and some strategy, right? So let's start there. In general, strategy is a plan that we create in order to be able to achieve our objectives effectively. Yeah. When we apply this to data strategy is how an organization deals with data, stores data, and handles data, process data in such a way that organization objectives are achieved effectively. Yeah.
Very nice, very nice. And is a data strat? Well, I guess you kind of answered it in the first question about future building a data strategy for the future. But how long is a certain strategy applicable for? How long is it valid for?
hmm yeah, that's an interesting question. So it depends on the granularity of the data strategy, like I mentioned in the first question. Yeah? So in general, having a data strategy defined for a very short term, like maybe a quarter or half an year, is not practical, because we need to implement a lot of practices, and also a mindset shift is required for the data strategy to succeed, and this is a long process. So ideally, a good data strategy should aim for something like 3 to 5 years from the inception time for it to really come into effect. Yeah. At the same time, the data strategy should also be defined in a broader way, and we have some iterative cycles or iterative OKRs to get towards the data strategy.
Interesting. Okay. And if we think about businesses OKRs in line with businesses, either B2C or B2B, often they have tons of data. They have lots of data. Maybe they don't know how to use it, but do you think that every organization needs to have a very well-defined data strategy before they start using this mass of data?
Mm-hmm. Um, um, yeah. So, like you said, almost all organizations have large amount of data these days, and all of them, in some way, have data strategy, if even if it's not well defined, like you said. Yeah. So, it is, in my opinion, a must to have a data strategy these days, because having a clearly defined data strategy helps us to be aligned with the company objectives, and it also creates transparency in the company from the data side, and it also paves way for a data drivenness in the company. So I think, irrespective of the size and function of the organization, a data strategy is a must these days.
Mm, okay, helps culturally to pave the way to being data driven, and helps to achieve the company objectives. And then transparency, yeah, a huge area. Know the business metrics that we're working with, and know what they mean. Okay, again, high level, just to begin with, what are the components that go into a data strategy
Mhm.
that you or any other data leader needs to start creating a criteria around?
Yeah. So, what exactly goes into data strategy differs for every organization. So, for this, we first need to identify what are the problems we are solving in organizations. When we know what the problem is, in ideal state, the reverse situation is what we achieve with the data strategy. For example, let's say we take a problem of time to insights being longer is a very big problem, and we want to address this with data strategy. Yeah. In this case, we need to understand why this is happening. For example, it could be because analysts don't have a good data catalog tool that they can easily use to understand what is the data that they're looking for. It's not allowing data discoverability and usability. It could be one case, or it could be a case that there are a lot of similar data sets created and we don't know which one to use. So we need to understand what the actual problem is, and once we understand that, we need to establish process and also guardrails to get rid of that problem. So all these processes come under the data management aspect of the data strategy, and the guardrails come under the data governance. So these two aspects are going into data strategy. And when we also talked about tooling problems, right? And another important aspect that always goes into data strategy is data quality. So data quality is a very important principle in the data world. So you could see use cases that don't need fresh data or data available super fast all the time, but you cannot see a use case that does not require good quality data. It always needs best quality data. So this aspect of data quality, processing and tooling has to go into data strategy. Yeah. And when we think about data quality, we also have to think about how to make these principles be adhered in the company. Then we can think about data contracts, right? So we can establish contracts which give us agreements with data producers on what are the agreed data quality principles, what is the SLAs, etc. And yeah, so we can tie together the data quality and see that it's not breached. So these aspects definitely go into data strategy.
Okay, so we've started with the primary problems. So we've identified, like, one could be time to insights.
Mhm.
So from identifying the primary problem to solve and defining our problem statement, what comes next?
Mhm. So sometimes, even if we understand what is the problem that we have, we don't really understand the underlying issues. So once we identify a problem, like for example, it could be time to insights being really long, or we do not have enough tooling to handle the volume of the data that we have. It could be problems like this. Once we understand them, we need to also ask why questions to really get into the problem there. For example, when the time to insights is long, let's start asking why is the time to insights long. Then it could be because, hypothetically, we have many similar data sets, so analysts are spending time to understand which one to use. Then we need to ask another recursive why question, like why do we have so many similar data sets? Then it could be because we do not have an organization standard on defining how data sets are created. There are different teams sitting differently, and then there are different KPIs calculated with same metrics. Then we ask another why question to really get to the root of the problem. Why do we have different metrics created with same names? Yeah, then we
Mm,
get the final answer, which is, we do not have an organization standard of defining which metrics do what, like what is the source, what is the custom metric, how is it being represented. So this is the root of the problem. So we need to understand this problem statements and really clearly define them to see what is going into the data strategy. Yeah, once that's done, we as I said before, we look into the data management and then the data governance aspect to get these process in place.
hmm, hmm. Okay. Asking the whys. This is going deep and it's getting to the root of the problem, as you say. How granular should a data strategy actually be?
Yeah, that one was coming. So and it's a very valid question. So the granularity of the data strategy itself, I think, depends on the size or on the function of the organization, culture, and also mindset. Yeah, but in general, if a company decides to give the engineers there the choice of the frameworks or programming languages they work on, it doesn't have to come into the technological details of the data strategy. But if there is a company wide decision to use a particular data quality framework or a tool, this goes into data strategy. Yeah, so it's
Mm,
also up to the data leaders to define the granularity of the data strategy. In most cases, what helps, like we discussed before, is to have a broader version of the data strategy on the problems that we identified, and iterate and have goals that iterate over periods to achieve this data strategy.
very good. Okay, this is good. So we have the problem, we have the problem statement, we've worked with the business, depend on, I'm guessing, their level of literacy to define how granular we need to be, as well as the problem. How about the process? What's the general process for defining the overall data strategy?
Mhm. So it is more or less outlined on the steps that we already talked about. So first, identify the problem statement, and then get to the details and see the underlying issues. So you have a clearly identified problem statement, and then understand what kind of processes and tools or data governance standards need to be changed to solve that problem. Yeah, once this is there, we need to see how data quality can be ensured. Yeah, with data quality comes data contracts tied. Yeah, so we are establishing a system where we are ensuring data availability and data quality is always good.
Interesting. The implementation of a data strategy, with the level of detail that we could go into today, it feels like the implementation of the data strategy is probably for the next podcast. Would you give us a quick overview as to some of the considerations that will go into the implementation of the strategy
Hmm.
as
Yeah,
a teaser, perhaps, for next time?
sure. So when we are thinking about a specific problem. For example, we want to address the problem of a customer engagement, which is at company level. Yeah. So,
Hmm.
what goes into data strategy is some data products that boost customer engagement so that we are aligned with the company strategy. And then we could come up with data products like, personalized recommendations, or customer engagement, customer segmentation, or, customer targeted models. Yeah. So for that, we need to understand what data we are looking at and create specific data products that serve the intended business objective. This could be one example of implementation.
And then implementing those appropriate and relevant data products by your data sets, data scientists or your data team members is another area altogether. Okay,
Mhm.
what are the common pitfalls? What are the common pitfalls that data leaders need to avoid when setting their data strategy and their data strategy goals?
Mm-hmm. So it's very similar to the question that we started with, I think. So, like, how can data strategy go wrong? So, it's also considering the same aspects. So, if we do not align with a company strategy, and we, even if we are defining a very clear data strategy, it's um, set to a disaster, because we are working differently from what the company is going towards. Yeah. And the second thing is not having clear objectives on what to do with the data strategy. For this, to really avoid this, we need to identify problems like we discussed, and then also understand the underlying cause to really address the root issues. Yeah.
Mhm.
And then additionally, what I can tell is, another aspect that is also important when we devise a data strategy is mindset shift. Yeah. So for an organization, people are important. So for a data strategy to survive, for a data company to be become, or organization to be becoming data driven, mindset shift of the very people in the organization is a must. So this is also something that has to be considered when we devise a data strategy, and data literacy programs or something can help here in
Mm.
addressing.
Do you see much pushback from stakeholders across the business as to this mindset shift?
Mhm. So previously, there was not a lot of traction on this data strategy topic, because data was not seen as a product but as a byproduct. Yeah. But
Mhm.
now the trend has been changing, especially with the evolution of AI. It has been changing, and this is calling for data products which are very standard and of high quality, and or of, adhering to strict governance rules. So these are all putting together a data strategy, right? So with this recent shift, there's more and more attention to data strategy and also openness from stakeholders. But this is something that has been like changing recently, and the challenges that you said were there in the past, and I think will still have to be dealt with in some degree even now. But overall,
Mhm.
there has been a mindset shift left already. But we need to really make people to understand how they can use data to actually come up with different data products from different businesses inside the organization as well, for which we have to also again look into the data literacy aspect.
Interesting. I guess over the last few generations, organizations have evolved as tech has evolved. So data and AI is another level of that literacy. It's not on a different path, it's just another level, or at least as I see it. And there'll be far fewer people that are illiterate to technology these days. So far fewer people that are on that path, that are not on that path, I should say. Okay.
Mhm.
Uh, So we talked about the organization's people. Now, if we look at the organization's leaders, you've mentioned a couple of times about alignment with the company's overall strategy. How about aligning with the business leaders? Are there serious considerations to be made there?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, as I said, data as products and data strategy is now like gaining more attention. So this also is a happy and mindset shift for leaders as well. But what is still required is strong data leadership skills in order to get good sponsorship for the data strategy to succeed. Yeah. And for that, it is really important for the data leaders to be aligned with all business leaders to understand where different functions of business is going, and to be able to um, cooperate with the different business teams as well in building data products. Yeah.
I should imagine there's an intense business casing with some data products, because we see business leaders, they always want to talk about being data driven, and they always want to implement AI in some way. But then you have CFOs and finance managers who, they don't see the costing or the benefit impact to that. So yeah, I should imagine at leadership level, having strong data skills is not to be underestimated.
Indeed.
Yeah, okay. It's a long process, I should imagine, in even getting to the stage of implementing good data strategy. But are there any shortcuts or templates, especially for smaller businesses that might be stricken by costs, for example, or
Mhm.
scale?
Yeah. So nowadays there are templates for almost everything. So yeah. So there are also templates for data strategies. So one simple thing that could one could do is, take a strategy that worked for company X and fit it, customize it in such a way that it solves our problems. Yeah. And for that example, we can start using something like, Databricks medallion architecture, which is a start for data strategy. But what is coming with these templates, or some other strategies, is resources. Although data problems are similar for almost all businesses, the way they are solved is not same in all organization. It depends on several factors like scale of organization, and culture, and also mindset shift. So what would definitely work is consider the problem statement definition and understanding the how to solve our problems. Even if we apply a template and we are clear on what our problems are, it's going to work. But in general, in my opinion, what I have observed is data strategies are always falling into like four major aspects. I can also
Oh,
call it as like four pillars. um,
okay.
like the data operations, where the focus is on alignment with business objectives and the operating model of the data teams, and data products. And
Mhm.
then the next other one would be data management, where we focus on data governance or data quality aspects. Yeah. And the other one would be architecture. So what are the tooling that is existing in the data platform, and what is the data ingestion standards that we follow, what is the data storage standards that we follow, more tech. And other one is people. Yeah. So we can talk about defining the roles for those who live the data strategy here, and also data literacy things. So this could also fit as a template.
Interesting. Thank you for your four pillars there: data ops, data management, data architecture, and people. Okay, very strong.
Mhm.
To put this in context, Could you give us a little bit of an insight into Scout 24's journey through data strategy definition? Is that
Mhm.
something that you were a part of?
Sure. Yeah, a part of, yes. So
Okay.
at Scout, we are also redefining our data strategy. So, as I said, redefining, did we already have one? So, yes, what we had was more of data landscape goals. And what we are currently doing is to come up with a comprehensive and clearly defined data strategy. So we are also looking at what are the problems that we need to solve, what are the data governance and other aspects that we need to pay attention to at this point. So what we do is to also keep it more iterative so that we are future proof as well.
Mm, okay. All right. Fair. You've mentioned only once the emergence of AI. I wonder how data strategy has evolved in the age of AI being embedded into businesses, large and small.
Okay, so nowadays in most organization, I hear data and AI strategy. So that's the level of embedding that has happened. Yeah, they are always together, coming mostly together. Yeah, so like we discussed before, so with the evolution of AI, I would say the data strategy aspect has also revolutionized a bit. Yeah. So we started seeing data as a product, and there is a definite call for data quality, trust in data, and data governance principles to be there in place before an AI application is built. And this is a requirement not just inside the company
Mm,
but also from the customers and stakeholders. Yeah. And
mm,
all of these pieces fit together in a data strategy. So the evolution of AI has really given a lot of focus on introspecting and revisiting data strategies in many organizations.
mm. And also, we see legislation having an impact on uh, data and AI. So I should imagine that legislation now comes into data and AI strategy.
Yes, definitely. Yeah. We always have the compliance part also falling under the data management that needs to be taken care of. Yeah, for all
Governance.
good reasons.
Yes, quite. Okay. I've got through the most of what I wanted to today about data strategy, and it's great that we've been over defining the problem and the problem statement, defining the level of granularity, um, understanding what data products we'd have to use, pitfalls, your four pillars to help creating data strategy. I wonder now for the data enthusiasts amongst our data community, what do you love most about defining or implementing data strategy? What hooks you in as a data leader?
Mhm. Um, it's a really refreshing concept to begin with, because it data strategy deals with most of the problems that are very much underlying, don't come out as problems, but in a different form. For example, like how a data organization sits when creating products. Does it make sense for a team to be centralized or decentralized? It depends on the scale of the organization, but we all go to that point where we revisit these things. And it is in fact also a way to re-establish our practices.
Mm, mm,
And when we are dealing with data governance, like you said, we tend to adhere as much as possible to the compliance rules when we revisit a data strategy. So these kind of things make sure that we are working on a very standard and compliant data platform and are building data products that are aligned towards company goals. And
mm,
it's a refreshing thought to begin with.
mm, mm. Vanilla, you're at leadership level. we work with a lot of people at IC level. Is there any way that these data ICs can contribute to data strategy or perhaps upskill themselves to be a contributor to data strategy?
Yeah, of course. So people is one of the important aspects that comes in data strategy. So one aspect of people we talked about is, everyone in the organization and data literacy over there. Other aspect is people who live the data strategy and who execute the data strategy. So this is a talent and skill set. So for a data strategy to succeed, we also need best of the talent, to actually make sure that we know what we are doing. Yeah. And this means there is also a need of clearly defining the roles and also coaching and development plans that are required. And this is also one definite aspect of people that we need to look in a data strategy.
Fantastic. Fantastic. I'll leave it there, Vanilla. If there are data enthusiasts that have more questions on this topic of data strategy, where should they find out more about the work that you do or
Mhm.
even ask you those questions?
LinkedIn is a good source.
Okay, super. We'll
Okay.
leave it there then.
Yeah.
Vanilla, once again, thank you very much for your time today. Really appreciate your input.
Thank you so much. And thank you for having me here, Joseph. It was a pleasure talking to you.